tonight. Thank you for that introduction. This presentation focuses on attainment of children in multi-grade classes in small schools in Ireland. At this point, I would like to acknowledge the guidance of my supervisors, Professor Ashley Levy from Immaculate College in Limerick and Dr. Amy Irving from the University of Limerick. This research has been supported by the Teaching Council in Ireland and Immaculate College, and I will refer to data from the Going Up in Ireland study. I have had access to this provided by the Central Statistics Office, but what I speak about is my work. It does not reflect their ideas. So the objectives of my presentation today are to share findings about mathematics attainment in multi-grade classes in small schools in Ireland, to demonstrate predictors of mathematics attainment among children in multi-grade settings in these small schools, and I will highlight just 3 of the recommendations from the study. I will begin by providing some context for the study. I'll speak about the framework and the methodology I've used. I'll then move on to speaking about patterns of attainment and some of the predictors of mathematics attainment, and I'll conclude with the recommendations. First of all, what are multi-grade classes? These are defined as where 2 or more grade groups are taught together by a teacher in the same classroom. And the essence of that definition has been utilised by most people who speak about multi-grade education. It is where a single teacher has responsibility for teaching 2 or more grade classes simultaneously. These are different from multi-age classes or mixed age classes, even though sometimes the terms are used interchangeably. And the difference is that in multi-grade classes, the children retain their grade level designations, even though they are of a variety of ages. There are different philosophical underpinnings to multi-age classes. I'm speaking of small schools in Ireland, and when I speak about small schools, a definition, an explanation of small schools provided by the Department of Education in Ireland last year is schools that have 100 or fewer pupils. Over the last 20 years, different numbers have been used, but that's the one that I'm using. It's the most recent. So where do these classrooms exist? They exist in small schools where, for demographic reasons, it is seen as a very efficient mechanism of educating pupils. In larger schools where there are uneven enrollments, multi-grade classes are used. So sometimes you might have single grade classrooms and then older children might be together. And then there have been examples in different countries where a decision has been made. Even though it is not essential in those schools to create multi-grade classes, they have made a deliberate decision to create them because of perceived pedagogical benefits associated with them. And there have been many examples in Victoria, Australia of this. So, while multi-grade classes are found in Ireland, Italy, Sweden, Finland, in South America, Northern America, Australia, Asia, I'm going to speak about the occurrence of multi-grade classes in Ireland. 22.8% of primary school children who attended primary school in this academic year, 23-24, were in multi-grade classes. 24.5% of classrooms, mainstream classrooms, had a multi-grade configuration in that year, and 42% of primary schools have 4 or fewer teachers. In Ireland, a lot of people live in rural areas, and there are many, many small schools where these classrooms exist. I'm going to briefly refer to some of the curriculum and policy documents that are relevant for my study. So at the time that the children from whom data was collected were in primary school in Ireland, the 1999 primary school maths curriculum was in force. This curriculum set out specific mathematics objectives for children at each grade level. So children in second class had a particular set of objectives for each content area and different objectives for third class, and so on. The document was accompanied by a publication called the Teacher Guidelines to guide teachers on how to implement that curriculum. In 2023, the new primary mathematics curriculum has been published. Since September of 2024, teachers are beginning to implement it. And in that curriculum, there are learning outcomes for children at 4 different stages. So now children in first and second class have broad learning outcomes that apply to children in those two classes for first and second class, similarly for third and fourth, and similarly at stage 4, 5th and 6th. That document is accompanied by an online digital toolkit to help teachers to enact the curriculum. Two relevant kinds of documents are two documents produced by the Teaching Council in Ireland. CAME, which means STEP, is the document that outlines the standards for initial teacher education in Ireland, while COSON, which means pathway, sets out the priorities for continuing teacher education in Ireland. And then in the context of a study where many of the settings are in rural areas, our Rural Future, which is a rural development strategy, is also relevant. Looking at the research on attainment in multi-grade classes, some of the findings of previous studies going back as far as 1953 have reported outcomes such as children are not held back by being in multi-grade settings, or there has been no evidence of difference, or outcomes may suffer, or children may not come to any harm, or there might be small negative effects, no significant difference. So when I looked at all of this research, I was struck by the divergent findings. Some people saying no difference, some people saying negative effects. Moving on to look at factors which influence outcomes of children in these settings. In terms of mathematics outcomes, the research is extensive in documenting predictors of mathematics attainment relating to ideas such as children's background, their social class, parental education, parents' expectations, their own characteristics related to whether the child has a special educational need, whether they're boys or girls, their attitudes towards mathematics, and then in terms of school factors, the use of digital technology, their teacher characteristics, and so on. The list is really, really long. So I set about thinking, how am I going to investigate children's mathematics attainment when there are so many factors in the literature related to multi-grade education and mathematics education which are relevant. These were the two research questions that I have focused on. What differences, if any, exist between the mathematics outcomes of children in multi-grade classes in small schools compared to their single-grade counterparts, and what factors influence the mathematics outcomes of children in multi-grade classes in small schools. I was looking for a framework that would allow me to acknowledge the holistic nature of child development. That was what led me to look at Bradford-Brenner's bioecological framework developed by Bradford-Brenner and Morris. In that framework, process, person, context, and time are the 4 different parts to it, and I was able to draw on the literature from multi-grade education and mathematics attainment to connect those processes, person, context, and time. In terms of time, I was very fortunate that in the data set I'm going to refer to, data was collected at 2 different time points that I was able to use at age 9 and age 13. So the data that I used comes from a longitudinal national study of childhood in Ireland called Growing Up in Ireland. I used data from wave 1 and wave 2 of the study. There was a mathematics score calculated from a criterion reference test called the Drumcondra Private Mathematics Test. The children completed questionnaires, as did their caregivers, their teachers and their principals at age 9. And then at age 13, the children, their parents, they were the informers because the children had moved to different schools, so it wasn't as easy for the study team to follow. Within that group, there were over 8,000 children who had math scores for the two areas, and the portion that is in a dark red, that is the portion of the participants that came from multi-grade classes in small schools. So I used the SPSS statistics package. I conducted descriptive statistics, test of comparison, and test of association initially, and then I built a multi-level model to investigate differences in outcomes as well as influencing factors. So this is what the distribution of the scores look like for children in single grade classes at age 9 and their counterparts in multi-grade classes in small schools. So the middle scores are absolutely identical, and there are some differences evident when looking at the distributions in terms of the lowest of the highest scores. However, when the multi-level model was created, what became evident from that was that after clustering and background characteristics were taken into account, there was no evidence of statistically significant difference between mathematics scores of children who attend multi-grade classes in small schools and children who attended single grade classes at age 9. And then looking at the distribution for age 13, you can see that the middle value is just slightly higher in terms of looking at it visually. And when the multi-level model was examined, 13-year-old children who attended multi-grade classes in small schools at age 9 attained scores which were statistically significantly higher than those of their counterparts in single grade classes. Now, the differences were really, really small, but it was unexpected for me because I thought about the time of the school day and the demands on primary school teachers to teach 2 or 3 or more different sets of objectives and content. So it was surprising for me from that point of view. I also looked at the changes in children's scores. So I ranked each child's math score and assigned the percentile rank at age 9, did the same at age 13 and examined the changes between them and constructed a model to examine that change. And what I found was attending a multi-grade class in a small school was not a statistically significant predictor of change in percentile ranking from age 9 to age 13, which implies that there were other factors at play, even though the children in the who had been in multi-grade classes attained higher scores. Looking at outcomes for boys and girls, at age 9, girls in multi-grade classes attained lower mathematics scores than boys in multi-grade classes, and scores were almost 2 points lower, and they were statistically significant. At age 13, there was no evidence of statistically significant difference when the scores of girls were compared to the scores of boys after accounting for prior attainment. So the result at age 9 was consistent with the pattern evident among the single grade cohort, while at age 13, this was different, which is a really interesting piece for me. And the last finding about attainment was when you look at children who are the highest attainers, children who attain scores in the top quintile. There was, as expected, more boys than girls attaining those scores, but there were double the number of boys in multi-grade classes compared to girls in multi-grade classes. So there was a significant disparity there. The same level of disparity was not evident among children in single grade classes. Looking at the factors which influence children's mathematics output, there were many. There were the factors I spoke about at the beginning related to processes, individual characteristics, school contexts, and home contexts. When all of these were entered into the model step by step, the individual characteristics retained their statistical significance, indicating that these were really powerful predictors of mathematics attainment. And these are the ones I'm going to speak about briefly. For children in single grade classes, girls attained statistically significantly lower scores, as did children who have a special educational need or condition. And children's reading levels were a very strong statistically significant predictor of attainment. So for children who were in single grade classes, having a reading score in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th quintile, they all predicted increases in mathematics scores. In multi-grade classes, always likely maths predicted a higher score, and those were all the statistically significant outcomes in that group. While most are similar to the outcomes in single grade classes, there are some differences. One is that among children in single grade classes, having increased internalizing symptoms score, which reflects levels of maths anxiety, that in single grade classes predicted lower mathematics outcomes. It did not have the same predictive effect among children in multi-grade classes. Also, never liking maths predicted lower score among children in single grade classes, but it did not have a statistically significant effect among children in multi-grade classes. So the question really is, what is happening in multi-grade classes that means that internalizing symptoms and maths anxiety is not having the same effect as it is in single grade classes, and similarly where internalizing symptom scores not having the same effect as so those are the main predictors of mathematics attainment from individual characteristics. perspective, and a lot of the processes and skill characteristics that individually were predictive when they were incorporated in the model, they're significantly diminished entirely. So to summarize, there are differences in attainment between the two classes. What is really important for me is that I found out there are positive outcomes evident for children in multi-grade classes. And one of the reasons this is significant for me is that as a primary school teacher many years ago, a parent said to me, should I move my child to a bigger school? Is this damaging their learning? So to know that there are positive outcomes. Opportunities for development and focusing on groups within multi-grade classes. So specifically thinking about girls who are attaining lower scores than boys, particularly thinking about high levels of attainment. Why are there particular groups, girls at the top levels, who are underrepresented? And many of the positive predictors of mathematics attainment are not fixed characteristics. It is possible to support children to become more positive, more interested in mathematics. It is possible to work on children's reading levels, which in turn are predictors of mathematics attainment. So reverting to the policy landscape in Ireland, our rural future mentions rural education. It prioritises technical connections and digital learning. It says that small schools are really important for social cohesion in those areas. It needs to be more ambitious and to prioritise multi-grade education as something that is very beneficial, where children can have really positive learning outcomes. For the primary mathematics curriculum, there is no reference, despite the fact that over 1/5 of children, 42% of schools have these classes, there is no reference to multi-grade education. So in the digital tool accompanies it, there needs to be some education for teachers or supports to help them to understand how they can meet the needs of learners in those classes. In initial teacher education, the CAME standards state that it is desirable that students would have a multi-grade placement. It is not essential. So more needs to happen in terms of initial teacher education, whether it is in terms of school placements or any other part of supporting teachers to develop the skills that are needed, because that is the only reference that is made. And similarly for the continuation of teachers earning, the CASAL framework, making a reference and supporting teachers in that journey. Thank you very much for listening, or Mila Mongrave, and your questions are welcome.
Thank you, Brit, for your very interesting presentation.